Okay, so um, a lot has happened since the last time that we were all at this stage, right? So I think to really start this off, what I really wanted to do was um, sort of chart your path, right? Because your stories are really the stories of this ecosystem, right? So let's chart a path from where you started to this current role that you're in and why this is interesting and impactful right now. Nubi.
Hi everyone. Great to be here. I think for me, where do I start from? Um, I was born in no, I'm not going to go that far, but I think it all started from a place called CC Hub for me, and that's Co-Creation Hub on Albert Macaulay in Yaba, and that was actually like the first convergence of like for me. I know there were perhaps a few before that, but for me it was like seeing a convergence of developers, creators, writers, and my foray into tech was actually as a tech blogger. So I was there on the sidelines observing those that were building and really participating in the ecosystem. I was like, wow, okay, tell me what you're doing, why you're doing what you're doing, how are things going. And so went from tech blogger, and I was like, well, I could remain writing about the stories or play an active role. And so I went from a tech blogger to actually being a founder. So founded a startup in 2014, an online takeaway site. And it was hard. It was really hard work, but a very practical experience to see again what it takes to build an online business in the space. So went from that, I sold out, got a job, went to business school, got a job with Accenture, a very large enterprise, a very large corporate where I also like learned a lot of skills. Also worked in the FinTech Innovation Lab there where I got back to interfacing with startups. And so went from, again, tech writer or blogger to founder to operator, and then joined Stripe. Fell in love with fintech because like I know how hard it was in my first startup to accept payments online, and here was this company in Stripe that was actually doing that with as simple as having an email address. And so I crossed the road, joined Stripe, and when Stripe acquired Paystack in 2020, I was like, I want to come home. So I moved from Stripe to Paystack to lead startup programs. And so it's been kind of like full cycle, going from a founder in Africa, in Nigeria, going to a large corporate, and then coming back to, again, now support startups. Because, again, I know how hard it is. So startups and founders need all the support they need. And so my job right now, like just to cheer them on and give them all they need to actually succeed.
Exactly. And what was that year when you moved from being a tech writer and then you moved into the other side?
What was it, what?
So you moved from being a tech writer, and I think you went to business school because you wanted to start that journey.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So
what year was that?
So that was 20. So I was writing, and it was like Tech Loy or Tech Bits. That was way before Tech Cabal and Tech Point. So yeah, that was like 2011. 2011 when I was like writing about tech.
So the reason I asked that, right, is that the ecosystem has evolved a lot since that time, right? There were just a few handful of startups that we knew. We know Google had just come in, right? Probably about 2010, 2 years before that. And there were some blogs writing about stuff. There were some people really, trying to take advantage of this opportunity. And one of those people, was you. Right? So take us on that path, right? Because ultimately, right, how we supercharge the ecosystem is learning where have we come from, what has changed, and how do we move forward from that. So, I really love your stories because they really chart that path as well.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think mine's not as interesting as Nubi's own. I think my own started with just finding a job, right? This must have been like 14, 15 years ago, out of school. You didn't get into an oil company, didn't get into, I think I missed the GSM company season, early 2000s. But then, like Nubi said, a lot of these significant things that you can sort of use as checkpoints happened around the 2010, 2011 CC Hub, a few multinational companies coming in. And for many of us, for many people, as much as we envisioned what we're seeing now, and we have a vision for the next 5 to 10 years, I don't think anyone was certain that it was going to be this explosive. Yeah, it was going to work, right? I've been at Google for 6 years, and I think I've been more in tune with the talent ecosystem. The first set of people who were building companies, who built a few companies that did things in the government or public space or in the education space with education portals and people checking their results online and then applying for some government services like, your passport or, there was a time where you go and check your JAM score, you need to travel to Lagos, scratch it, So there's been a couple of evolutions. And then when you go from that 2014, 2015, and then you come to 2020, 2022, and you walk into an event like this, you see 10, 20 companies, you literally don't recognize anybody. You've been in this position for, say, 5, 10, 15 years, or 5 to 10 years, and then you look in the audience and it's a completely different set of brand new people with new job titles. I think it's really, really amazing. So for me, I would say the interesting part is where we are now doesn't look anything like where we were 5, 10 years ago. And even as at that time, even if you had a few interactions with some of the companies, whether there was some of the early fintechs in mobile money, Paga was just down the road from CC Hub. We used to just walk down. Weren't really sure what the connection was. We didn't even understand what some of those founders were talking about when they were talking about raising money and building businesses. Until today, where people have literally solved that problem, raising is almost not such a big deal anymore. Everyone understands that, process. People are even digging deep to find out, so what exactly are you doing? It's not just raising money or trying to earn revenue. I think it's amazing and only can be very optimistic for the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. And it's very interesting, that you say, how much has changed, right? And how much people have learned some of these solutions to some of these problems. But, sometimes you look back and you say, or look now and say, the more things change, the more they stay the same, right? We still, have some of those problems, right? Which we're going to circle back on, to really learn from you guys in terms of what you're doing towards solving those. Olumide, so, this has been around for about seven years? Right,
yeah.
Right. And again, right, that is really charting the path of the growth of the ecosystem and the waves and cycles. And many people might not know, right, you're also the founder or chief innovation guy at Prime Startups, right? So you're also trying to drive the ecosystem forward, right? And probably that's the reason for this event. So take us through that.
Well, like similar to Nubi, my own experience started from CC Hub also. Most people, community leaders, or had that first experience at CC Hub. Fast track down the line, being a designer, I offered services to several startups, right? And shortly afterwards, I had a little bit of experience in investment, helping to set up the first private trading floor, right? And afterwards, helped set up Zone Tech Park, right? So that was when we had the likes of Figma and all of that, all just launching, right? So my role at Zone Tech Park also sort of put me at that spot, though we had started Lagos Startup Week before then. And that, gives me the opportunity to work with all the whole spectrums of the whole ecosystem, right? VCs, I know the problems they are facing. And, what it has been over time is, okay, I'm speaking to, let's say, a newbie, I understand his problems, right? Or I speak to Aniedi or any other person, I understand their problems. I'm connecting this person to that person because I know this person has the solution to that person. So that's simply what my own. So we see ourselves at the center, talking to all players and bridging that sort of gap, quote unquote. With their support anyway. So that's why we're here, because of them.
Yeah, it's interesting what CC Hub has really done, right? And I love what they're even going beyond, Nigeria to, the iHub and Rwanda and all of that. So it's super, super important, supporting the startup journey. So let's really unpack now, right? This topic of supercharging. So let's try and see what are, in your journey, right? What are some of the gaps and problems, right, that you guys saw years ago, right? And also, what are you seeing now? Have things changed? Have things gotten better? And then I'll tag on another question. How are your programs, right, building with these problems in mind?
Yeah. So like back then, and there were articles. If you go back to the archives again, TechLoy, OTechBits, TechPoint now, and there are articles I will say we surveyed founders, we asked them for their top challenges, and number one will be funding. Yeah, and it's crazy because today. When I joined Paystack to start the startup program, the first thing I did for the first 3 months was to speak to hundreds, literally hundreds of founders in Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa, which are the markets that we're currently live in. And unsurprisingly, the number one issue that founders still flag is funding. So it's crazy how, although we have like all the articles around billions of dollars coming into the market, people can now raise funds at very nice valuations. Still, for that early stage founder, for that founder getting started, funding still remains an issue. And so at Paystack, one of the programs we actually run is the Investor Connect program, where because of some of the work that we do, we're interfacing with a lot of investors. And so we tell them that, okay, let us understand your investment thesis. What are you looking to? What stage do you invest in? What industry? What sectors? So when startups come to us and say, oh, one of my issues is funding, and we see a possible connection, we can actually facilitate those introductions, and we're looking for ways to actually scale that. So that's the first. The second that we have heard is knowledge. So people are saying, tell me what I don't know that I need to know, but also help me know the things I know I need to know. And so as Paystack, we've gone through the motions of launching, scaling, expanding, getting acquired. So pretty much the full cycle of a startup. And so how do we codify this knowledge and share with the ecosystem, but also go beyond that to even facilitate peer-to-peer conversations, because it's true that the reality of the ecosystem when Paystack was started is different from today. Perhaps we didn't have so many regulatory constraints and a lot of perhaps competition as well. So again, how do we peer people who are facing the same realities or a little bit a step, maybe a year or two ahead, to actually again share knowledge with each other. And we have a couple of programs away, like the compliance support programs, a couple of events as well, where we bring people together to actually have these conversations. And then I'll just end with the last thing, because we were surveying for the top three. And then so beyond funding, beyond knowledge, the last one is talent. And so back in the day, you were competing with one or two other people for talent. Now you're competing with the multinationals. I'm not going to mention any names. But you're also competing with the global markets. Now with COVID, everybody's online. There's remote work. People want to earn in dollars and other currencies. So not only are you competing with your local markets, you're competing with the global market, but when it comes to tech talent. And so people are asking, how do I attract and retain talent, but also how do I develop my talent? And so again, we try to develop, programs or work with people who are running programs like Venture for Africa, where we say stacks, Paystacks. Stacks are people that work at Paystack. So stacks, can you volunteer time as facilitators, as mentors in these programs to help people develop skills? A lot of people are in the traditional industry, so they're banking, your insurance. They are super operators, looking for ways to break into tech. can we help them? Can we facilitate that transition? So yeah, again, summarizing again the top 3 issues back then. Funding was number 1. It remains number 1. But yeah, there are other like plethora of issues. But again, the top 3 that we saw today: funding, talent, and knowledge. And again, the startup programs. We design programs internally and also in partnerships. So if anyone is in the crowd tackling any of those verticals of knowledge, funding, or talent, let's talk and find ways to actually offer support to founders.
Okay, great. I mean, super, super important, that connection, right, between, traditional and the startup ecosystem. I know that there seems to be an exodus from some of the traditional banks, towards the startup ecosystem, which is, a surprise and a change from many years back, right, where maybe startups didn't feel as secure, right, and a great career move. So that's a really great one. Now, so looking more towards, Google, right? I mean, talent, right, is sometimes the understated elephant in the room, right? A lot of VCs would say even that their companies have raised money, right, but they can't find the right talent, to go with that, right, to really supercharge the company forward at a time that they need it, right? And you've really focused on talent, right? How would you say things were many years ago, right? And how have those things changed? What are the problems now, and how do we move forward?
So one of the first problems you have with talent is the competence and the quality, right? So at some point you're looking for people that have the right skills. Sometimes you're even looking for people that have just the basic skills because you want to bring them into the pipeline. So the challenge or the way you go about solving the talent problem, first of all, is you drive awareness. People hear about it, people hear about the opportunity, people get attracted to it, people come in and ask questions, and they want to find ways to continue that conversation beyond just, I attended an event. So they want to build community, they want to talk to people, they want to build relationships. So the first thing you want to solve is thus the awareness that, look, these are the opportunities, and this is the knowledge you need to acquire to start tapping into these opportunities. Then when you drive that sort of awareness, and then you're thinking of the quantity of people who are required. Sometimes that quantity is underestimated. People will tell, there are no developers in Africa. Or the question is, how many developers are there in Africa? Or how many of these developers are really very good? But then when you start talking to founders or start listening to some of the problems that the businesses are having or some of the upcoming problems that we're expecting even in traditional industries like the banks in the next couple of months, is that talent is leaving, or those people are having talent problems. The 2 types of talent problem: you're losing talent, not because people are changing careers. Like, it's not like people were developers or founders or product managers and they're no longer, maybe they've moved to agriculture or some other thing. It's that they're getting opportunities elsewhere. So which means the quality has risen to the point where people are either demanding more or being offered more, and like Nubi said, all around the globe. So if the quality has improved to the point where you are now recognized internationally and the talent is leaving for bigger opportunities, then that means to some extent you've solved some part of the quality problem. People are good enough. People can land roles. People can go lead teams. People can join teams as a junior member, or 2 people can come out of, say, an Andela and work in a company 4 or 5 years ago, and they don't get kicked out. They stay there till their time is up, and then they go on and do something else. They may even come back into the ecosystem and become the chief technology officer of one company or start another company, or they see a big gap somewhere in the talent ecosystem and they try to solve it. And then you come to the question of variety. What kind of talent? Like, is it just developers? Do you have UI? Do you have UX researchers? Do you have people in compliance, data protection, all the new skills coming up, whether it's, AI, machine learning, blockchain, cryptocurrency, cloud. So you start having the different ways in which the talent problem manifests. Either because as you grow bigger, you realize what your specific needs are, and then, or because as your talent matures, they move on to other things. Either they want to start their own company or they want to go elsewhere. So I think This is a far cry from 5, 10, 15 years ago, where people were either looking for a developer or every company, including every bank in Nigeria or every, big multinational in, advisory or oil and gas. So everyone was offshoring their work, right? I don't want to call countries, but specifically you'd say, I want to get a developer from this country or from that country. It's not like it doesn't still happen, but look around, look in this room, look at companies that are coming up with a lot of innovative solutions, products, and ideas. A lot of that talent is homegrown. And then the final thing, like Nubi said, I think the second answer to the rhetoric question you asked, if you pull up to most founders now or to most businesses now and you ask them what's your biggest problem, the early stage people will still say funding, but I can assure you that the late stage people will tell you talent. So the quality of talent. I'm looking for a CTO. Every founder, every entrepreneur with a great idea who's not technical, there's no day someone is not coming to you, me, and says, I need a CTO, I have an idea, right? And when you look at that, I need a CTO question. It's a very loaded question. It means I want to understand the market. I want to understand how to hire here. I want to understand the platforms that I need to connect to choose for messaging, for payments, for regulation. It's a very loaded question. It's not I need someone that can code very well. No, that's not the I need a CTO request. It's something much, much deeper. I need someone who has built something, who's failed, who's sold out, who's been part of a huge operation that happened somewhere. And then when you go out, even within my contact list, and I go and try to find a CTO, that person is probably a co-founder, a CEO, or as Jackpot.
Can I quickly ask, right, just to follow on that? So, I mean, how are we upskilling people towards that, right? Because a lot of people would say, a CTO is, this guy can code, right? So now to have that well-rounded, set of qualities is not just, you don't come out having all of those things, right? So, I mean, where's that talent coming from? Where's the quality coming from? Is it the Andelas? Is it the Google for startups? Is it the universities? Is it maybe the traditional Access Bank and I'm leaving, right? How do we actually bridge that gap? Or how are we bridging that gap?
I think everybody's playing a role, very crucial role, and no one partner or anyone can exist on their own, right? So for some of the bigger companies who saw this from afar or who could just do copy and paste, what you've done in the US, North America, or Europe, you just come and do it here and say, look, you need to start communities, you need to start running tech events, you need to do training, you need to offer scholarships, right? And that starts building the base. People jump in there, grab that knowledge, replicate that, and all of a sudden they find out it's not enough. Or they even find out that big company's restricted, limited offering is not diverse, so it's not enough variety. So then people start finding themselves and start forming other professional communities. Either it's domain expertise, it could be fintech, it could be data, it could be any other thing, or it is related to particular technology, right? And then what then happens is a lot of these communities are open, but what I've also seen now is that there are a couple of closed communities. Not because they don't want, it's not exclusive, it's not like they don't want you to enter, but CTOs are having conversations with themselves. Okay. By the time you had things like accelerators and incubators, you had opportunities for companies from here to go to Y Combinator. Paystack goes to Y Combinator, comes back and shows you how to write a Y Combinator deck, right? You don't get that knowledge elsewhere until you've been there, done that, gotten the validation, put yourself in the most advanced markets and figured out that, okay, now I know it. I can come back and tell everybody this is exactly how you do it. Offer that, I can help you do it. People just come and do it. They're not even paid. It's just mentor. If you have a deck, send it to me, I will help you. I'll package you and I'll tell you what to do. Then that starts multiplying. Also for the bigger companies, like some of the things we did with like maybe our startup programs, initially the way to acquire some of this knowledge or to bring that knowledge in-house was for people to go outside. But like was said, I think in the previous, there's so much you can do by going to Silicon Valley to copy or taking a few people from here. You need to build local mentors. You even need to let people here who have been in media, business, accounting, consulting, know that that knowledge that many startups and many products are looking for when they go to copy from the West is actually in you. You just need to change your engagement model and actually become a mentor at any of the startup programs or any of the many CC hubs, incubators, accelerators that are. So that needs to be democratized more. And it is happening, and it will continue happening. And that's how you will see the talent ecosystem grow.
Okay. Yeah, please go.
Yeah, just a quick just a quick addition as well, because and this could be controversial, but I think even the jackpot people, like those that have jackpot, because I mean I'm one of them. I jackpot, but now I'm back at Paystack running the startup programs. So even the engineers who then go to become like engineers, perhaps software engineers, senior engineers, they get to lead teams in, again, your Googles, your Amazons, your Stripes and all. I'm starting to see, like, after like 3, 4, 5 years, perhaps they're fully vested, they're thinking, I want to go be a CTO at a startup in Africa. So I think that's even a pipeline in itself. Like, let them go, like, learn, let them go develop those skills. And then they come back and, like I said, they become CTOs, CEOs in startups here. So I think it's like, it might be like a loss now, but I think for me, like, yeah, they'll all, not all, but a good number of them will come back to also bridge fill a gap in this talent,
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. I love that in terms of, being able to bring new kind of skill sets to the ecosystem, but I also love what you were talking about as well, that for sustainability of that, right, you need to really combine that with the ecosystem street smarts, right, and what has already been learned locally, right? There's so many things about our ecosystem that's so different, right, to other ecosystems. And when you try to sort of, use copy and paste, you're hit by many things that are invisible to the eye before you come in, right? So with what you're doing at Prime Startups, right, I know you work with a lot of traditional companies as well, right, that are looking to innovate, leverage the startup ecosystem, and also contribute and supercharge what's happening, right? How are some of those efforts helping to support the ecosystem and the traditional guys who have some of this domain knowledge?
Oh, well, I'll say, like, I'll first give you a little bit of context. 7 years ago, when we went to pitch the Lagos Startup Week at the financial institution, right? And they were like, no, we don't work with startups, we work with SMEs, right? So many of the telcos that we see today, they didn't have a digital transformation unit. All they just had was SME, right? Interestingly, I had a senior colleague in that pitch who sort of, found that balance to say, well, startups in that context, you could look at it in terms of staff strength, blah, 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 now. But right now, if you say startup, they get it. Right now, 7 years after, what I do with more of traditional institutions is for them to begin to think like startups. Right? Being big in nature, like I go about teaching design thinking, how can you set up like an innovation unit. Perhaps they're also working on a new product, but are sort of struggling. They have the skill set, but in terms of, I'll use the word culture and framework, right? They lack that. So we take it from top down, bottom up approach. It means every graduate entry level person that comes into most of these financial institutions has to know or has to learn the basic concepts of design thinking, taking things from ideation to product development, right? Obviously in their own form. I have the examples I have to give has to be in their own context, right? And from the C-level, executive level down is to say, okay, all of this data, all of these insights, how do you make use of it, right? Because at the end of the day, they are the ones that make the decision, right? And that's why you see today so many, corporate institutions or corporate organizations have this unit or that unit. And on a little of context, some of them see innovation first. I'll say there's been like some sort of journey or trajectory. When you're speaking to a corporate and you're saying, innovation. Some, at some level, saw it from a marketing standpoint, right? In terms of actually, instead of doing the actual work, it's just more of this hackathon today, that hackathon tomorrow. So when you're talking of innovation, you're speaking with the marketing unit. That was the first level, right? Second level is perhaps the CTO thinks it's just making use of technology, right? And now you now have another stage where you have everybody understands that every unit has to be involved, the knowledge subject matter expert, the whatever, right? The whole units have to be involved in terms of also working with startups or working with external partners, and that's why we have lots of corporate startup collaborations happening that have, built game-changing products.
Thanks. I think that's super important because it really helps both the traditional side of things, that's super, super important, and the startups to really be more proactive, right, rather than reactive, right? I think, being in the telco space, I really see that is super, super important globally as well as, across Africa now, where a lot of them are being more proactive and going after, digital opportunities rather than waiting and being, kind of behind the curve sometimes.
Yeah. I just want to add one or two things. Three things crossed my mind. Piggyback on what you said. So, very interestingly, when you talk about innovation units or talking to some of the traditional businesses, sometimes when you go to pitch or when you're talking to like a bank and they're saying, we want to do a hackathon or we want to do a tech fair, sometimes when you ask, so what does success look like? You'll be I'll give you a practical example. 3-4 years ago, the main message from the bank would be, yeah, we want 10,000 students to be in the hackathon and all of them should open accounts. Like, that was the marketing goal. Like, they should open 10,000 new students' accounts.
Are you sure that's still not now?
Well, in some places. But now when you have that conversation, they will tell you we want to see at least 5 or 10 or 20 startups building on our infrastructure, using our APIs, using our payment channels, right? So you see, infrastructure is extremely very important. On the infrastructure conversation, that infrastructure unlocks a lot, right? When I know my payments are settled, right? We now have people that are solving for identity. If you take the identity conversation like 2 or 3 steps back, this hit me when I think we had an event and the current CM of MTN, Adia, said this. If you understand how much innovation BVN has unlocked in all the startups, I don't think there's any fintech startup that if there wasn't a BVN that was created by government, right, that anybody would be doing any work, right? So just imagine just something as simple as that, NUBA numbers, BVN, 10 this. Once that is settled, and maybe something like a bank who has direct access or the payment platform, then anybody can build anything else on that. Because I know if I send an API call to this, and I can verify who you are, how many accounts you have, I can now open a lending or credit or so that just unlocks everything. Another one you would see is things like virtual accounts. So now there's some banks that maybe they don't have the most fantastic product, but they can spin up the virtual account for you to complete a checkout and do bank pay with transfer. So many businesses, so many innovative startups are building that. So things like, those kind of platforms, payments is sorted, identity is sorted. It is when people take a step lower and become platforms. There are startups out there that are solving credits and instrumental payments. Once that is solved, then you can layer on every other thing, e-commerce, varieties of these for different segments. So you see that a lot. And then the final thing I want to talk about was your talent, right? Apart from the people who are going out, like you say, Jackpot, and then they're coming back, there's a huge diaspora talent that some of them have even forgotten home. They never even, probably they were even born there, but they're Nigerian, they want to come home. The people who have gone and are coming back, the people who are building from scratch and are getting to the zenith, they're actually unlocking options for people who have, in quotes, a Nigerian name, but have never been to Lagos before. You now know that you can walk away from your 200K, 400, 500K job in Google or Amazon or Stripe and come and build a business in Nigeria because people are doing it and probably even doing it better than you. So you can start with angel investment, you can start coming to Nigeria not only for Christmas, you can come 4, 5, 6 times, and then you can bring your talent and experience to either help a startup, build a startup, or just join a startup. So the options for people there coming home, the options for the new grad or the student who's on strike now who says, what do I do with my time? And then he looks at some people and says, okay, if I do this for 6 months, I can become the next this, right? So that whole availability of options, I think, is what's going to supercharge the ecosystem.
Exactly. And, I think that's really key for supercharging the ecosystem. And I love the last point that you mentioned where, the more platforms we have, whether it's government, whether it's other, players and startups that are building these platforms, right? We have a lot more that we can supercharge forward because these are unknown things that can be built on top of that, right? I know a gas delivery company that's, being able to support retailers with, utilizing embedded finance, right, and giving credit to them. That's a whole different industry, right? So that's empowered by that. Just moving to, if you don't mind, yeah, moving to the next and the final area, right? So one thing you mentioned was looking at problems, the next problems that are coming, right? When you look, 5 years from now, right? And we look at talent, we look at structure, we look at all of these different things, right? What would you say are some of the areas that we really should be looking at in terms of upskilling or building talent? And when I say that, I look at blockchain, right? Blockchain, you try and get a blockchain developer and they're super expensive, right? Because most of them maybe Eastern European or Indian or, and they'll tell you that, developing a normal app is this, but then developing a blockchain type app is this, right? Should we be building that locally or is it too early, right? Should we be building for AI? We know everyone has an ML app, which they don't really, right? So should we be really helping people to, in that area? Metaverse, it's serious. We know it's serious. We know 50 to 60% of all US companies say they have a strategy towards metaverse. We know 2030 is Mark Zuckerberg's magic number, right? Should we be looking at that kind of thing for the ecosystem? Or are these things we shouldn't be looking at? I'll start with you.
So I would say emerging technology, obviously, more, I would say community-driven efforts would have to be done in order to have, such vast number of talent. So I'll make reference to Figma and perhaps, I'll make reference to Figma, right? So Figma, Dylan was actually in the country, I think sometime 20, if I recall well, 16, 17-ish. Right, shortly before they raised, I think, $100 million. And there was an event that was held in Yaba, right? So I'm a UX designer, so most UX designers, and interestingly, Google also hosted the Google UX Masterclass sometime in 2014 at LBS, right? There were like 2 sets. So it took how many years? Now everyone says I'm a UX designer. Since 2014 down now, you can now see what the impact is like, right? So for emerging tech, AI, blockchain, the rest are assured that, within the next 5 years, you would now begin to see, so much talent in that space. But lots of community-driven efforts would have to be put in by perhaps a big player also.
Okay. So, I mean, for both of you, I think we'll close out with that, right? Are these, you guys are at the big boy companies, right? Do you think these are technologies that we should be building our capacity in, knowing that, again, most companies are building for 2030, or are they too early, right? We know that Africa, a lot of times, we're more reactive. When it's now something that everyone is looking at, then we start looking at it, right? Should we be building now for the next supercharged stage of the ecosystem?
Personally, and again, I'm reinforcing the word personally. I think rather than look at the West, so like the US or Europe, there are other markets that we could perhaps reference, and that would be Southeast Asia, Latin America. And for me, if I'm not seeing the trends there yet, I think those things are early. I think we have, as they say, while I'm not the finish, I think we have so much work to do on just infrastructure, getting things to work today. right now, the continent is still very much fragmented. If you want to set up a payment in Nigeria today, you're doing it from scratch. If you go next door to Ghana, start from scratch. Like, I mean, we're not like from a remittance or from a money transfer service within the continent, that's still broken. So, I mean, at Paystack, that's our mission. We want to fix that, and so we'll keep focusing on that and really like making that infrastructure work. And yes, if there's, I mean, I'm one for let's exploit and explore, and so yes, we should invest some resources into exploring new technology. And I like again CC Hub. All credits due to them. I was already exploring this with partners like even Google to look at AI, ML, deep tech, because that would, I mean, eventually come to the surface. But I think right now there's some infrastructural like dependencies that we need to address first. If not, like, what do you run your AI and ML on if you don't have internet that's working well, or you're not able to pay for goods and services even efficiently in Web 2? So yes, let's do the needful for today's problems, but also invest in the aspirations of what the future will bring.
Okay, and we'll just close out with you, Aniedi.
So for me, I think and Nubi is very right. The other view I would like to add is that we have a very talented population, right? Some of the smartest people in the world, strong English-speaking, natives. People can figure things out, right? So the first thing is, if these trendy technologies are coming out and you have super smart people all over, I would just encourage people to just figure out what the technology is. Like, so there's blockchain, there's Web3, learn it, put it in your pocket, understand the fundamentals so that the use cases, when it is clear to you why something should be decentralized or tokenized or this, then you can bring it to the market and you'll be very, very innovative, right? But if you learn a technology and want to build a business and a startup or a career just because of the trend, you'll absolutely get it wrong, right? So I would rather be more involved in the foundational conversations than in the forced use cases that we're trying to make happen. So there is the hype cycle, which everyone would, come along with. But like for the people who, like if I was a back-end developer, sorry, I missed the whole blockchain. My brain is it's not carrying. If I was a back-end developer or somebody that was, into the front end or something, or even the product research, and I was actively coding, and they said there's this new thing, I definitely would not just sweep it aside, jump on it. What is it about? How is it different from this? Why is it like that? Why is it like that? These are the strengths, these are the weaknesses. Doesn't seem like there's a use case. We don't even have internet. We don't have payments. Keep it on the side. When it hits you that this thing around, tokenization, decentralization may be a way for someone to build an app that makes it easy for people to buy fractional stocks. It looks like cryptocurrency, but it's not. It is something more foundational: tokenization, decentralization, fragmentation. Then you can use the underlying principles to build something else. And if eventually the technology, whether it's the metaverse or whatever, just comes and catches up and becomes the norm, then we're not left behind. But trying to force the use cases now, definitely not. Then ignoring the trends and figuring out, like, can we even build the capacity, put it in our pockets? It's not like when your parents say, go and do medicine. Go and do medicine, collect it, come back and say, okay, daddy, take the doctor says you got the lawyer certificate. And then you go on and you say you're doing tech. Then all of a sudden you find out something called compliance. Or there's healthcare technology. Then you go and dust your MBBS and come out and say, okay, this is how to use AI in medicine. I think it's going to be that kind of situation. So go grab the technology, but don't force it.
Thank you. And with those words, we close out. We've come a very, very long way from the 2010s when this kicked off, and we still have a long way to go, but we can see that we're moving. Some of these problems are still big, but we're chipping at them, and we know people in the audience are part of that solution as well. So thank you very much, guys, and
thank you very much.
Let's have a brilliant rest of the day.